Greetings, Starfighters. First Shameless Cashgrab of a new year, 2019. I wonder if that's a prime number. I'll look it up later. Anyway, next movie, 1960s Atom Age Vampire. This sounds like a good old-fashioned sci-fi B-movie. The kind of movies that, nerds like you and me, we all love. Whether we're watching them by ourselves or watching them being riffed on by a guy and two robots up in outer space. I don't expect much from this movie, but that's actually probably going to be to its benefit, because you all may remember how kind of disappointed I was in Count Dracula and his vampire bride. So, Atom Age Vampire. Let's do this.
Okay, this took a little longer than I meant it to, but here we are. Atom Age Vampire. Or, most of it anyway. I'll get to that in a moment. Plot summary courtesy of Letterboxd. When a singer is horribly disfigured in a car accident, a scientist develops a treatment which can restore her beauty by injecting her with a special serum. While performing the procedure, however, he falls in love with her. As the treatment begins to fail, he determines to save her appearance, because that's the only part that matters, right? Regardless of how many women he must kill for her sake. Right off the bat, I knew I was in for something special when I realized that for the first time since back in Season 1 of this show, I was getting a movie with an English dub. Considering that I didn't see a good English dub of a non-American film until well into the 1990s, there was no way that this was not going to be unintentionally hilarious. Oh, and it's Italian, too. Nice. The first two people we meet in this film had tones of voice that were so different that not only were they obviously not in the same recording studio, I don't even think they were in the same country. The female lead, the singer, is over-the-top, soap opera melodramatic in her delivery, while the guy breaking up with her because of her job sounds about as enthused as someone reading a menu at McDonald's. Oh, and they managed to teleport during the conversation somehow. Seriously, the singer was facing the door when she tried to hug the guy who'd just dumped her, but when he pulled away, suddenly he's facing the door, and is much closer to it than when the conversation started. Great editing there. Despite that, the first act gets a lot of credit from me for not wasting any time. From the title sequence, to the breakup, to the car accident that is the inciting event for the plot, the movie kicks into full gear in a mere 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Like I said last episode, there's nothing wrong with a slow burn. Given the car accident, I should again say no pun intended, but it's not necessary for every movie. Anyway, we cut to the aforementioned singer, her name is Jeanette, in the hospital after one of the worst filmed car accidents I've ever seen. I mean, really, the car catches on fire after going over what amounts to a speed bump amount of dirt at less than highway speeds. And it's not even a Yugo. A nurse kindly informs the audience that this is 3 months later, and Jeanette looks perfectly fine under the bandage wrapping. Or, as the movie calls it, is hideously disfigured. When we do finally see the disfigurement, you can probably hear the air quotes there, it's some admittedly serious burn scars, but only on her right cheek. Not exactly pretty to look at, but, Wait a minute, if the damage was only on that part of her face, why was her whole head bandaged? It's not like a movie like this could afford a medical consultant. But yeah, the scars, you honestly can't even see them when her hair falls over them in this scene. Also, I'm not sure, but I think I spotted a few takes spliced in where they forgot to put the burn makeup on her at all. Not 100% sure, but if that happened, whoopsie. So yeah, we have the disfigured dancer, and then we go from her to a mysterious benefactor with a sexy assistant archetype. She really is an archetype more than a character. Her name's Monique. A little bit more on her later. But he sends the archetype, assistant, to the hospital to recruit Jeanette for his experiments. And, well, you remember the plot summary. We meet the doctor, as well as his stereotypically mentally challenged janitor, who also feeds the rabbits, and the sexy assistant at his lab, and it hits me why the pacing has seemed so off already when we aren't even 10 minutes into the movie yet. The dub. Specifically, the actors are clearly trying to talk as fast as they can so that they don't keep talking when the Italian actors' lips stop moving. I understand the impulse, but while I'm not an expert on voiceovers, I know enough to know there's better methods than this. But after that scene, Jeanette and the scientist with the experimental treatment, his name is Alberto, after they finally meet, he tells her to show him her burn scars, and the lighting in this scene is so bright that you can't see the makeup even with her hair removed. Well, I mean, okay, I say you can't see it. There's some little sort of bumpage, I guess, around the edge of where the makeup would be that you can kind of make out, but that's really it. Considering how central her injury is supposed to be to this movie, they sure do a lousy job of showing it. Anyway, the guy who'd dumped her at the beginning of the movie re-enters the picture at this point, and he says that he was at sea when the accident happened. I call bullshit, because Jeanette got into the accident as she was driving away from the club where he broke up with her immediately afterwards. Plan 9 from Outer Space had better continuity. But regardless, he's a main character now. Yay. Hopefully his actions will contain more excitement than his voice. Meanwhile, Jeanette's procedure has worked, and the burn scars that you could barely even see, especially under certain lighting, is completely gone now, and the doctor is being el creepo, gazing at her unconscious body while the sexy assistant gets all jealous. Fun fact, if you saw the plot point of the sexy assistant getting jealous coming, congratulations, you don't need glasses. So after Dr. Alberto's #MeToo moment is over, and Jeanette is taken upstairs because, of course, a reputable doctor would perform experimental medical treatments in his house, he and the assistant, Monique, I think I said her name already, but just in case. You know, it occurs to me I probably should use these characters' names more when I talk about these movies. Anyway, Alberto and Monique discussed the possibility of after effects of the treatment. That's more science than one usually gets from sci-fi horror movies of this era, so points gained. Points lost, however, in the following scene, wherein Alberto declares his love for Jeanette and insists that she loves him too in a scene that I'm pretty sure is gross, even by 1960s standards. Don Draper would look at Alberto and go, "Man, this guy just has no respect for women." That was my one Mad Men reference for the year, by the way. I hope you enjoyed it. During this scene, however, is when we get into the second act of the story. See, part of Jeanette's scar comes back, much lower on her neck than it was originally, because this movie has about as close a relationship with continuity as Donald Trump has with Tiffany. But as the plot summary says, this is when the murders begin. I mean, not literally, there's build-up to that. The movie isn't that short. But no, first they roofie Jeanette before taking her back to the lab. I made the Me Too reference too early in the episode, didn't I? Not that Monique is any better. She demands that Alberto never see his patient again before she helps treat her. Granted, he shouldn't be seeing her again after acting all creepy McCreeperton on her after what amounts to a fancy skin transplant, but still. Around this point, stuff starts happening so fast I can barely keep up, but apparently in the space of minutes, Professor Alberto has come to the conclusion that he needs to kill young women to get what he needs to treat Jeanette's burns, and Monique, showing sense for the first time in this movie, points out that this is a bad idea and runs out. Well, out of the lab, I mean, she only goes upstairs. Okay, so it was only a little bit of sense. Not enough to get out of the house and go to the cops, but then we couldn't have the scene where Alberto rambles on about how it's just an infatuation, and Monique can help him get over it, and I can't help but think that this guy sounds like an incel who acts like he wants to change but doesn't really mean it. Now, while the movie is not even half over at this point, I find myself reminded, unfortunately, of Eternal Evil from back in Season 1. Remember how I complained that that movie moved so quickly it was like it was summarizing itself? This movie is starting to do the same, and that pacing is not helped by the voiceover actors trying to keep pace with the lip movements of the Italian speakers. I feel like I'm missing some important lines of dialogue here, but sadly there's no closed captioning options on these Mill Creek sets, or at least not the ones I have. Anyway, after Alberto and Monique have their moment, and after Monique quite stupidly agrees to stay, on the grounds that she wants the perf to herself, and he swears he'll send Jeanette away, which we know won't happen, like I said, the movie's not half over yet, we get a spliced-in moment of an old heavy-set guy behind a desk. That's like, literally, it's like... And then we're at the main gate of Alberto's house. I don't know what that was about either. Just there. Anyway, at the gates, the police are there. And Alberto invited them. Turns out that during the bad edit, Alberto killed Monique. Gee, who could have seen that coming? You know. Off screen, of course, because, who wants to see something horrible in a horror movie? And Jeanette learns that Monique is dead by way of the janitor not doing anything except looking kinda sad. Okay. But, yes, that's why the police are there. Alberto pretending he just found her dead in bed and called the authorities to be responsible. Okay, it's a bit more clever than we usually see from B-movie antagonists. He won't get away with it. This is a cheesy horror movie made in the late 50s. Not No Country for Old Men. But at least the plot doesn't require the cops to be utter morons to move the story along. The movie picks up a few points here as well. Though considering the last time I gave the movie points, it lost them in the next scene. Oh, what do you know? Actually, the next scene is the professor basically laying out his personal philosophy for the lead detective, while another doctor does a prelim on Monique's body. I'm sure the conversation was quite interesting, if only it went slow enough for me to understand it. After this, we see a young couple walking through the woods. Now you may be thinking, so they're going to get separated and the girl will be killed, or maybe they'll both be killed but the professor only takes the girl's body. Well, that was silly of you. Of course this movie would not dare to show such things as the killer actually killing anyone. No, the young couple simply stumbles across the body of Alberto's next victim. Again, killed off screen, to which the girl of the couple responds with an attempt at a scream so badly done I actually laughed. Man, if that was the take they went with, huh? Yeesh. But yeah, once again, the horror movie decides to have pretty much all the horror happen off screen. Except for Jeanette's blink and you'll miss it, hideous disfigurement, again with the air quotes, that is. And don't worry, I haven't forgotten that this is a movie in a vampire set. I'm getting to that. Trust me, you'll be very underwhelmed. See, what happens is, in a scene that includes audio from earlier in the movie, and also audio from scenes that weren't in the movie at all, or at least not in this cut of it, the professor injects himself with an earlier, failed version of the formula he used on Jeanette. Well, more failed anyway, since Jeanette's burns keep coming back roughly every other day, but she doesn't know because the professor keeps knocking her out and treating her again, and it really just hit me how stupid Jeanette is. Right, so as the Wikipedia entry for the movie put it, Professor Alberto injects himself with that failed formula called Derma 25, quote, in order to become monstrous and remorseless so that he may seek these victims without hesitation. These victims being the women he kills for their glands to treat Jeanette. He didn't seem to have too much trouble killing Monique or the first girl he killed after, who I already discussed, but okay. So what kind of monster does Alberto become? Well, he must look at least vaguely vampire-ish, right? This movie is in a vampire movie collection, and yeah, I can't even finish the joke. You know full well he doesn't. Bad skin and long white hair. That's basically it. Yeah, I shouldn't have made that Jurassic Park joke in the show notes to the last movie. I mean, it actually did have vampires in it, albeit briefly. After the transformation, we almost get our first on-screen kill. Almost. Also, somebody should have told the actress in the booth that the character she was dubbing over had her mouth covered. If anything, the scream got louder after Alberto put his hand over her face. As for how Alberto becomes normal again after the deed is done, He climbs into a thing I could describe as a cross between the TARDIS console and the Cone of Silence from Get Smart. Except this movie predates both of those. Screw it, that's my frame of reference, so that's what I'm calling it anyway. Oh, and Jeanette's boyfriend is back. Did you forget about him? That's okay, so did the movie for about 20 minutes. But here is where he and Jeanette are reunited. Yay? I guess? The reunion is cut short when the janitor, Sasha, again, I really need to start using these characters' names more often, on orders from Alberto, whacks the boyfriend in the neck, sending him off the edge of the pier and into the water. They both then drag Jeanette away. She doesn't scream or fight back, though, despite there not being any sign that they knocked her out, either with physical violence or drugs. Maybe that happened off-screen too, like most of the stuff in this movie that matters. But the boyfriend is alive and goes to the cops, who, ironically, decide to speak to Alberto not as a suspect, but as a possible consultant. Of course, the cops bring the boyfriend, Pierre, with them because movie logic. When at Alberto's house, it becomes abundantly clear why this movie's pacing is so off. They've literally cut out whole chunks of it. The detective references the name that the press has given the unidentified killer of the young women Alberto had been killing, except in this cut of the film, this is the first time we actually hear it. I have a feeling this was the case after the scene in the lab with all the audio from conversations that hadn't happened, but this scene confirms it. So, remember what I said about how underwhelmed you would be about why this movie is in the Vampire Collection? Well, here it comes. In describing what happened to the victims killed off screen, we learn that their glands were taken through 2 holes in their neck. Yeah. There's your vampire connection, folks. Oh, and to make it even better, the detective offers the theory that the killer is a monster that came in off one of the boats from Japan, and that it was a man psychologically as well as physically scarred by one of the atomic bombs dropped at the end of World War II. To which Alberto basically drops the movie's title, calling such a hypothetical person a vampire of the atom age. Worst title drop ever. But the movie manages to pick up another point by having the detective still not be an idiot, wacky Japanese bomb victim vampire theory aside. Man, that's an awkward sentence to say. The point is, clearly something must have seemed off to him during that visit, because the next scene at the, well, let's just call it the police station, since that's what the audience is supposed to think it is, we see him ordering an exhumation of Monique's body for a more thorough autopsy. Thumbs up. This movie is weird. Not because of the exhumation. I mean that it just sort of seems like the good and bad aspects just keep canceling each other out every few scenes or so, leaving us with a movie that's just there. For every character who shows good judgment, we get an actor looking at the camera when they clearly weren't supposed to. For every effective use of quiet, there's a bad edit. And the dub does no favors, that's for sure. But, hey, either way, it's almost over. And hey, wouldn't you know it, points gained earlier are lost yet again, as our antagonist has gone full dumbass. Him giving Jeanette back her gun from earlier in the film, she had a gun earlier in the film, when she wanted to kill herself, could at least be forgiven thematically. He had a whole spiel when he took it away from her earlier, that he'd give it back when he was certain her injury was cured and she'd have no reason to want to kill herself. That was his logic. But he follows that up by going into a woman's home to kill her for her glands, while he's being tailed by the police, which he is aware of. And he fails because he doesn't notice his target's big freaking dog, and he does all this without having transformed himself again like he did earlier in the film, and he runs away from the home without even trying to cover his face. Not that it would do any good, of course. The woman who was saved by her dog got a decent look at him. But yeah, Alberto has gone full incel at this point, and only Jeanette being in a state of perpetual panic keeps her from killing him. Insert obvious Chekhov's gun joke here. Nope, that honor goes to the mute gardener, Sasha. Remember him? That's okay, I only mentioned him a few times. He stabs Alberto in the back. Quite literally. But Alberto apparently decided that this needed to be done, so he forgives Sasha as he dies in his monster form, and turns fully human afterwards. Yep, that was certainly some pathos there. Not necessarily good pathos, but pathos. The end. Random thoughts I had while watching the movie. Early in the movie, Alberto becomes convinced his treatment for Jeanette will work when he uses it to fix some damage on Monique's arm. That never comes back the way Jeanette's facial scars do. Why? I don't know. I also don't know why Janine's treatment requires transplants when Alberto can turn himself from the monster back into human with what looks like steam in the TARDIS console of silence thingy. I kind of love how the dub actor for the detective actually makes an effort to pronounce all the non-Anglo names correctly. Most wouldn't even try. You can find anime dubs from the 80s and 90s where the pronunciations are way worse than the detectives. Final verdict? Do you want the short version of the final verdict? Well, good, because that's the only version I can give. Some movies simply feel incomplete, but Atom Age Vampire is quite literally that, as by some accounts, as much as 20 minutes of story have been cut from it. And that's from the English version. The original Italian version is 105 minutes, including credits. The US release was initially 87 minutes. Don't know if that includes credits or not. Wiki didn't say. And the version on this DVD is 69 nice minutes. So what I have is a cut-down version of a cut-down version. Ranking this at the end of the season is going to be rough. I mean, how can I fairly score a movie that I've only seen 2/3 of? It's the Warcraft movie all over again. So, what's next? Well, we're staying in the 60s for now with this set. Tune in next time for 1962's The Bloody Vampire. Blah. Oh, wait, I said I wasn't going to do the blah thing anymore, didn't I? Shit.